Ben, welcome to the show. Ben Burgess. He's author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. He teaches philosophy and logic at Rutgers University. Ben, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing great. You're here with Anna and the gang.
All right, excellent.
Also, Ben has requested that he be on the Sam Harris Tribunal.
I mean, I really think I'd have something to bring to the Sam Harris Tribunal. You'd be fine.
You're cracking up a little bit. Are you there? Are you good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, you're perfect. All right. You always get a sense of Ben's domicile in these calls. You always get like a... I'm glad that we use the photo of him with his dog, right? The family hound. All right, so this debunk, I haven't watched all of this debate yet.
I have.
How was it?
Oh, it was so good.
Yeah,
good.
I agree.
Yeah.
Zizek, I'm sure Zizek did a good job.
No, Zizek killed it.
Yeah.
Zizek killed it, and I mean, just as point of reference, Jordan Peterson's whole thing about how he mugged up on Marxism was that he read the Communist Manifesto, which is like assigned in like 10th grade civics classes, and the thing like. I don't even mean this as a diss. It would be like think of a guy like Amartya Sen, right? Who's like a contemporary philosopher and economist, right? And he's written some. Let's not even go to like his academic books necessarily. He wrote a book called Development is Freedom, which is very hard to read in some ways, but it's like written. It's written for a broad audience, right? Mm-hmm. So like I won't even go the equivalent of you needed to read Capital, but like the Communist Manifesto would be the equivalent of being like. Yeah, like I read one of Amartya Sen's Guardian columns, so I got it. Like, the fuck was that?
Well, he also said that he was prepared for the debate. He didn't say this in the debate, but beforehand, he did a video where he said he was prepared for it by watching some of Zizek's YouTube videos. So that's about as much homework as he does.
Wow. I mean, it showed.
Yeah. So you have a particular moment here, though, of Jordan Peterson that you wanted to elucidate on, Ben. And we have it. Should we play it first, or do you want to set it up?
Let's just go ahead and play it. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. I guess the one thing I'd say is to go along with what we've been saying about how little homework he does. A point that Peterson makes pretty regularly, like he tweets this out about every 6 months. He'll find some statistic about how global poverty has declined over the course of the last couple hundred years. And, of course, the part of that that's recent, a lot of that's about playing with stats. You did a segment about that.
Right.
A while
very
back.
Important, yes. Steve Pinker caught being a stinker on poverty stats. Yes.
Yeah, I linked to that in the article that I did about Peterson the debate. But yeah,
I never thought I'd get linked to in Quillette, by the way. Thank you. Respect.
A lot of regular Quillette readers were pissed that they published that. So that was fun to see on Twitter. But
awesome.
But yeah, but like he regularly tweets this stuff out, and and it's not just that like the recent stuff is a textbook case of how to lie with statistics. It's also that, like, in a really weird, fundamental way, the fact that he thinks that it sort of it proves something about left-wing criticisms of capitalism being wrong, that, like, things have gotten better since 1800, like, he's just missing the point in a fairly bizarre way. Like, socialists do think that capitalism is better than feudalism, right? And and then what he's about to express
pretty elemental to the whole story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then apparently, and keep in mind, this is a guy who talks about Marxism all the time, but he admitted at the beginning of his presentation, right, he went first to the debate, that this was the first time he'd read the Communist Manifesto since he was 18. So I think it's safe to say that, it's not like he's been reading Capital or the Gundry, since then. But he seems amazed that in the Communist Manifesto, Marx says that capitalism is better than feudalism. Like, he just can't fit this into his picture of Marxism, which is just a fun thing to think about as you watch the clip.
All right, let's check out this clip. And I also, at some point, I'm going to want to mention China in the next couple of minutes, but let's watch the clip.
Error, let's say, although by no means the last, was this, and this is one of the strangest parts of the Communist Manifesto, is Marx admits, and Engels admit repeatedly in the Communist Manifesto that there has never been a system of production in the history of the world that was as effective at producing material commodities in excess than capitalism. Like that's extensively documented in the Communist Manifesto. And so if your proposition is, look, we got to get as much material security for everyone as possible, as fast as we can, and capitalism already seems to be doing that at a rate that's unparalleled in human history, wouldn't the logical thing be just to let the damn system play itself out? I mean, unless you're assuming that the evil capitalists are just going to take all of the flat screen televisions and put them in one big room and not let anyone else have one. The logical assumption is that, well, you're already on a road that's supposed to produce the proper material productivity. And so, well, that's 10 reasons as far as I can tell. And so what I saw in that the Communist Manifesto is
that's
like,
probably... It
all right. All right.
It keeps on going like that, but the important thing is that he caught us, that like he correctly had the insight that the reason that socialists don't like the existing economic system is that we're worried that the evil capitalists will hoard all of the flat screen televisions in one room.
It's part of the whiteboard of this show. I have a grid and it shows flat screens, evil capitalists, and then it's the people.
Well,
Yes,
what he's doing there, at least this was my read of it, wasn't done accidentally, right? Like, I think that was intentional in a way to minimize what people in the middle class and working class are going through and what their grievances are. They try to characterize people who are dealing with economic frustrations by making it seem as though they just want more. They want materialistic things that they don't really need, but that's not really what's happening. I mean, we're talking about serious, human basic rights that are being denied as a result of the system that we have right now, as a result of the wealthy hoarding their wealth, not hoarding their televisions, hoarding the resources necessary to create a system that's just and fair for everyone.
You could substitute food for TVs.
And this is exactly the funny thing about the Peterson example in the first place. Capitalists aren't interested in commodities for their use value, right? They're interested in their exchange value. So so like a capitalist wouldn't want to hoard a bunch of flat screen TVs. They would want to sell a lot of flat screen TVs.
Right.
Which is why they might give you a high interest credit card to get one while you still can't have a house. But anyways, Ben, I hope we're on the scent here. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, just a small note about this. Peterson really needs to update his examples, because this idea of like the flat screen TV as like the luxury item, I don't know the last time you tried to buy a TV that wasn't flat screen. That's kind of a that's like a sort of weirdly outdated example to use. But of course, as Anna points out, there are a lot of people who might have a TV in the house, but they also don't go to the doctor to get the growth checked out, because like they don't have health insurance, or they have health insurance and they can't afford, the copay or deductibles. So it's like what Peterson is doing here, beyond the bizarre straw man about the flat screen TVs being hoarded in the big room, is
it's a very Jungian image. You got to give him that.
Is that one of the basic archetypes? Is this is the room with all the TVs something you have to get through when you rescue your father from the Dragon of Chaos?
Sure.
But it's also just an amazing false dilemma, right? Either you have your objection to capitalism is that it doesn't result in technological development and lots of commodities being created, or you just have no grounds for complaint, right? Like that's it. Like those are the only two possibilities. And so it certainly can't be, for example, that you say, okay, well, we have technology that can, that can produce a tremendous amount of goods, but we have objections to the way that the form of social organization distributes those goods, right? I mean, like, that's a fairly obvious place to go with that. Or even that we have reasons for not liking the current system other than even the distribution of goods, right? So Peterson is completely ruling out the idea that, for example, one reason that you could find capitalism objectionable is that you think that democracy is valuable and it's impossible to have meaningful democratic participation on the same level, for Jeff Bezos and somebody who works in his warehouse, or that the person who works at the warehouse doesn't get any say in the control over over their workplace, or just that it's just not conducive to human flourishing, to make everybody this economically insecure and to make everybody spend this much of their lives on their economic lives, which you would think somebody who is really interested, as Peterson is, in psychological well-being, in getting people to like think about other areas of their lives, in getting people to have families and all of that stuff, which are of course all of the things that Peterson valorizes. Right. That that you have family and spiritual bonds and traditionally structured communities. A lot of that, sure, we would have criticisms of, because it's like, the stuff, he valorizes things that are, they're very patriarchal and so on. But for better or for worse, all of those traditional bonds are constantly eroded by capitalism.
Yes.
And that's just a huge contradiction at the heart of his whole worldview.
Sorry.
Go.
That was such a powerful point because it's so true. I mean, look, remember, Peterson, his origins, where he comes from, why he's a public figure now. He's a Canadian professor who enjoyed a much better healthcare system. Let me just get that out of the way. Yes. And the reason why he became so popular is because he misinterpreted guidance in Canada in regard to how to treat transgender students.
Yes.
So, I mean, first of all, he didn't even do homework on the very issue that he, went on a temper tantrum about. But more importantly, you're right in that there's all this pressure to have children. Oh my God, these millennials in America, they're not having kids and we're not replacing.
Yeah, why not?
Exactly. And they never listen to the reasoning. They never do. And when it comes to issues regarding housing and how unbelievably unaffordable it is, we get hit with, well, you guys spend your money on avocado toast. I mean, there is like a very concerted effort to either pretend like they don't know what the economic frustrations are, or they just don't care to learn because they're, sitting in their ivory towers and are completely unaware.
The last thing I just want to say real quick, and I know people in this, like the Jordan Peterson sphere, don't necessarily like when you get to like concrete examples, as you've seen, Ben.
Yes,
and I am not a defender of the Chinese government. Okay, like it's definitely not a good government, not good. However, it is amazing to me that so much of those like grand statements about poverty reduction, when you account for, yes, there's a huge amount of statistical problems. What are we actually talking?
The real stuff is in China.
That's the hilarious thing, is that the bulk of those numbers come from a place that is still a self-identified communist government that has state-directed capitalism in a way with more government intervention, as well as, by the way, the ability to protect industries from extractive World Bank policies, because they're so big that at a certain point they were able to actually say, fuck you, like, we're going to actually have like an internal, like industrialization policy, and you're not going to be able to set it and extract it, right? And now, of course, they're like playing their own colonial games in Africa. But like, regardless, the bulk of those numbers is coming from the People's Republic of China, a self-described communist government that has government intervention more government intervention than I would want in personal parts of life.
Sure.
But certainly in the economy. So that's also like the incredible irony of that example.
Like absolutely. Like if you actually care about these global poverty figures and what drives global extreme poverty, there are basically two things that account for the division between the first world and the third world. One of them obviously is the long-term effects of colonialism. But the other is whether or not you were allowed to use state intervention to build up your own industries. So for example, a country I lived in for 3 years, South Korea, is like a extremely rare case of a country that actually did make the jump from the third world to the first world, because the dictators who ruled it for a long time made the decision to ignore the advice they were getting from Western economic advisors and said, no, we're not a real country until we have our own cars. And they were able to use a lot of protectionist measures to build up their own industry, whereas through a combination of bad advice and military force, that option has been denied a lot of the rest of the third world. And in fact, China, if you watched about 5 or 6 more minutes of the Peterson clip, which was much more than I was going to subject viewers to.
Thank you.
I know, that's, I don't want people's eyes bleeding, while they're watching the show. But if I did, at the end of the whole thing, he says, if you really want to reduce poverty, what you should want is something as close as possible to a free market. And the China point just completely obliterates that, because whatever you think about China and exactly how you want to classify China's kind of economically liberalized, still kind of Stalinist, hybrid, one thing you cannot call it is anything that anybody would mistake for a free market, right? There's a massive amount of state intervention in the market. And so if this is the source of your poverty statistics, you can't claim, or you can't honestly claim, that those statistics support the idea that what we want is something as close as possible to a completely free market.
And the reason those Korean dictators could get away with ignoring it was because they were like a bulwark in fighting communists and doing dirty work on behalf of Western intelligence agencies. So that was like a quid pro quo.
Absolutely.
And also all these people who valorize China in the Western capitalist class, again, also underlies the fact that they don't have any problem with we're going to bulldoze a village to build an airport, which would actually be a good example of where I'll be a fucking Western liberal and be like, that's not cool. Mm-hmm. You can't eminently domain these people's houses to build an airport, right? But they're totally fine with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, but of course, what you're doing there, and what, presumably, I think, Jordan Peterson, would object to what he would no doubt view as the nefarious, communist government of China doing things like that. But what we're doing when we object to that is we're saying, even though this system, the Chinese system, has resulted in a lot of industrial development that has cut down on the worst forms of poverty, that doesn't mean that we're cool with it, or that we think that that's the best that humans can do.
Right. That's socialists dare to be better. We're like the Nike commercial of politics. Ben? Yes, Anna, please.
I have one other
go.
point/question. So, in the context of the United States, there is this notion that private industry is truly private. But I think what gets left out of the conversation is that these corporations, especially the most successful ones, Google being one of them, some of these pharmaceutical companies, they would argue, or the executives would argue, that they are not in favor of government intervention, that they want as little government as possible. But in reality, behind the scenes, and I think most taxpayers are completely unaware of this, they actually love government involvement, especially in the very beginning with research and development. And so U.S. taxpayers spend a considerable amount of money on research and development for pharmaceutical drugs. And then these same pharmaceutical companies will turn around and price gouge us.
Yep.
And so I think it's important to drive that point home, especially here in the U.S., where, these capitalist thinkers are completely unaware of how much the government helps these companies, build, research, develop, all of that. I mean, they don't do it on their own. And so as soon as they see that success, they'll turn around and say, no, 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 we don't want the government regulating us. We want to be able to do whatever we want. They always socialize losses and, privatize the gains. Always.
Yes. Enclosure of the commons. Exactly.
I guess it's more of a comment. Sorry.
No, that was
but I mean,
perfect
that's
summary of everything.
Totally right. I mean, Rutgers does tons of that. I mean, that's to a great extent, that's what the public university system is. It's a way of offloading the R&D needs of private corporations.
Ben Burgess, the book is Logic for the Left. Give them an argument, Logic for the Left. I own a copy of this book. This book is amazing. Everybody should have him on for sure. This book is awesome. I'm going to host Ben. Actually, a lot of Burgess coming up. Thursday on the Majority Report with me, and next Tuesday, Ben returns to studio to talk about our feelings.
Yeah. No, I think we're going to do a little meditation in the studio.
I'm going to teach you meditation. I'm going to get you in touch with that. I think
fair enough.
Not all of your chakras are as clear as they could be, but mine either. All right,
yeah,
brother.
that's what Griscom's been telling me. Okay.
Griscom thinks that pouring whiskey into his chakras.
Hey, it clears something out.
It clears something. All right, brother. Thank you, man. You've just watched a Michael Brooks show video, and you can watch all of our full main live shows every Tuesday night at around 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and subscribe to get all of the clips you want. We're covering the globe. We're focusing on international relations, the intellectual dark web. We're having fun. We're doing deep dives with a lot of amazing guests. Of course, become a patron for the whole thing at patreon.com/TMBS, or subscribe to this YouTube channel and help us keep growing and get that content out there. Subscribe below.